I never thought I'd be the guy with the revenge story. My name is Ethan Miller. 3 years ago, I was just another programmer with big dreams and an even bigger mortgage in Brooksville. I had a wife named Laura, who I thought was the love of my life, a small apartment that was mostly filled with computer equipment, and a startup idea that kept me up at night. Ethan, we need to talk, Laura said one evening as I was hunched over my keyboard, putting the finishing touches on what I believed would be revolutionary software. I barely looked up. Just 5 more minutes, honey, I'm almost there with this code. No, now. Her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. When I finally turned around, I saw her standing there with 2 suitcases. Not 1, 2, and she was dressed like she was heading somewhere important. My stomach dropped. What's going on, I asked, though some part of me already knew. Laura set a manila envelope on the coffee table. Divorce papers. I've already signed them. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Divorce? Laura, what are you talking about? We can work through whatever this is. She laughed, and it wasn't the laugh I'd fallen in love with. This one was cold, almost cruel. Work through it? Ethan, we've been working through it for 3 years. I'm done living like this. Done with the promises that your big break is just around the corner. Done with coupon clipping and budget grocery shopping while my friends are vacationing in Europe. I stood up, my project momentarily forgotten. Laura, I'm close. So close, this platform could change everything for us. That's what you said about the last 3 projects. She crossed her arms. I've met someone else. Those 4 words hit me like a physical blow. Who? I managed to ask. Richard Stanton. The name didn't register at first, and then it did. Richard Stanton, CEO of Stanton Enterprises, one of the largest tech companies on the East Coast. I'd read about him in tech magazines, dreamed of pitching my ideas to his company someday. The Richard Stanton? How did you even meet him? Laura looked away, a slight flush on her cheeks. I applied for an executive assistant position at his company 6 months ago. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd see it as me not believing in your work. 6 months? My voice cracked. You've been seeing him for 6 months? It wasn't like that at first, she said defensively. But yes, we've been together for about 4 months now. And Ethan, he can give me the life I want. The life you promised me when we got married. I felt like I was drowning. So all those late nights at work, I was with Richard, and his world is everything I've ever wanted. He has a penthouse in New York, a vacation home in the Hamptons. He flies private, Ethan. Private. Her eyes glittered with excitement, and I realized I was looking at a stranger. And what about love? Do you love him? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Laura hesitated just long enough for me to know the answer before she said, I'm learning to, but what I know for sure is that I don't love this life anymore. She gestured around our modest apartment. I don't love watching you waste your potential on pipe dreams that never pay off. Waste my potential? Laura, I've been building something revolutionary. You've been hiding from reality, she snapped. Real successful people don't hole up in apartments in Brooksville. They're out there in New York, in Silicon Valley, making connections and making things happen. I was stunned by the venom in her voice. So that's it? After 5 years of marriage, you're just walking out? Richard is waiting for me downstairs. She checked her watch. I'll be staying at his place in the city until the divorce is finalized. My lawyer will be in touch about dividing assets, though there's not much to divide, is there? The look she gave me was so full of contempt, it physically hurt. Laura, please, I said, hating the desperation in my voice. Just give me a chance to show you. The platform is almost ready. I've got meetings with investors next week. I've heard it all before, Ethan, and even if by some miracle you do succeed this time, it's too late for us. She picked up her suitcases. Richard knows people, real investors, not the small-time angels you have been chasing. He could have made things happen for you, but you were too proud to even consider asking for help. I wanted to make it on my own merit, and look where that got you, where it got us. She shook her head. Sign the papers, Ethan. Don't drag this out. As she headed for the door, a terrible thought occurred to me. Did you tell him about my platform? About the algorithms I've been developing? Laura paused, her back to me. Richard was interested. He asked questions. I might have shared some details. The betrayal was complete. Not only was she leaving me for another man, but she'd potentially compromise years of my work. You had no right, I said, my voice hardening. That was proprietary information. She turned, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of remorse. But then it was gone. It doesn't matter, Ethan. Even if your idea is as good as you think, Richard has the resources to develop it better and faster. That's reality. Get out, I said quietly. Gladly. She opened the door. Oh, and Ethan? Richard says men like you are a dime a dozen in this industry. Ideas are worthless without the capital and connections to back them up. You should remember that. And then she was gone, leaving nothing but the scent of her expensive perfume and divorce papers on my coffee table. I stood there for what felt like hours, my world collapsing around me. Then I slowly walked to the kitchen and pulled out the bottle of Johnny Walker Black that we'd been saving for a special occasion. This wasn't what we'd had in mind, but it seemed appropriate now. 3 glasses in, I was numb enough to think straight. Laura hadn't just broken my heart, she'd put my entire future at risk. If Stanton used my algorithms, years of work would be worthless. I'd be competing against my own creation, backed by one of the biggest tech companies on the East Coast. I dialed my friend Marcus, who worked in IP law. She told him what? Marcus exclaimed after I explained the situation. Ethan, that's a major breach of confidentiality. Did she sign an NDA when you started developing this? No, I admitted. She's my wife, was my wife. I didn't think I needed one. Rookie mistake, Marcus sighed. But all isn't lost. Document everything. When you started development, what specific proprietary elements you created, timestamps of code commits. If Stanton releases anything resembling your platform, we can still make a case. But that would mean years of litigation against a company with bottomless pockets for legal fees. One battle at a time, Marcus advised. First, finish your platform. Get it to market. Establish yourself. Then we worry about Stanton. After we hung up, I looked around the apartment that suddenly felt too empty, too quiet. Laura's words echoed in my head. Men like you are a dime a dozen. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't just finish the platform. I'd make it better than anything Richard Stanton could imagine. And then I'd make him pay for taking my wife and trying to steal my future. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and burning determination. The divorce papers still lay untouched on the coffee table. They could wait. I had more important matters to handle. On the 4th day of a coding marathon fueled by rage and caffeine, my doorbell rang. A courier delivered a package from Stanton Enterprises containing a check for $50,000 and a condescending letter acknowledging conceptual similarities between my work and their upcoming platform. I stared at the check, fury rising in my chest. $50,000. That's what Richard Stanton thought my years of work were worth. That's the price he put on stealing my ideas and my wife. I ripped the check into confetti, then grabbed my phone. James, I said when my potential angel investor answered, I'm ready to show you the platform. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. 2 days later, I sat across from James Wright, a veteran tech investor known for taking chances on unconventional startups. I'd worked through the night to prepare the demo, pushing myself past exhaustion to make sure every feature was perfect. So, Ethan, James said after the initial pleasantries, Laura won't be joining us. She usually sits in on these meetings. I hadn't told many people about the divorce yet. No, we're separated. James raised an eyebrow. I'm sorry to hear that. Recent? Very. I cleared my throat, but that won't affect the project. If anything, I'm more committed than ever to making this work. I see. James studied me for a moment. Well, let's see what you've got. I launched into my presentation explaining how my predictive analytics platform could process unstructured data faster and more accurately than anything currently on the market. As I demonstrated the software, James's interest visibly grew. This is impressive, Ethan, he said when I finished. But I heard rumors that Stanton Enterprises is working on something similar, scheduled to launch within the next quarter. My heart sank. Richard was moving fast. Mine is better, I said firmly, and I can prove it. How? Give me access to a data set, any data set. Let me show you what this platform can do in real time. James considered this, then pulled out his phone. After a brief call, he had his assistant email over a massive data set from one of his portfolio companies. Customer behavior patterns that had been proving impossible to analyze effectively. Show me what you can do with this, he challenged. I imported the data into my platform, set the parameters, and let the algorithms work their magic. Within minutes, patterns began to emerge, clear correlations and predictive insights that would have taken weeks to find using conventional methods. James leaned forward, his eyes wide. That's remarkable. This is just the beginning, I said. With proper funding, I can expand the capabilities even further. By the end of the meeting, James wasn't just interested, he was excited. I'm prepared to offer $2 million in seed funding for 15% equity, he said. But I need you to move fast. If Stanton beats you to market, they won't, I promised. And James, I need something else. Connections. I need to be introduced to the right people, not just for the business, but to build a profile. I want the tech world to know who's behind this platform. James smiled. That, Ethan, might be even more valuable than the money. Consider it done. As I walked out of his office with a signed term sheet, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Laura left. Hope, and something else. The first stirrings of a plan that went beyond just succeeding. A plan to take everything from Richard Stanton, just as he had taken everything from me. Over the next 3 months, I barely left my apartment, except for meetings with James and his network. I renamed the company Miller Analytics, incorporated in Delaware, and assembled a small but brilliant team of developers who could help refine the platform. The divorce was finalized with minimal fuss. Laura didn't want anything from our modest assets, clearly confident that her future with Richard would provide all she needed. I signed the papers without reading them, already focused on what came next. 6 months after Laura walked out, Miller Analytics launched at TechCrunch Disrupt to rave reviews. James had coached me on my presentation, helped me polish my image. Gone were the rumpled t-shirts and 3-day stubble, replaced by tailored shirts in a more polished appearance that still maintained an air of startup authenticity. 3 major clients signed up on the spot, impressed by what the platform could do. By the end of the conference, we had a waiting list for our beta program and interest from several larger investment firms for our Series A round. And then came the news we'd been waiting for. Stanton Enterprises announced a delay in the launch of their analytics platform, citing technical challenges. The rumor mill suggested their algorithms weren't performing as expected. I knew why. They tried to reverse engineer my ideas based on what Laura had told them, but without the full picture, they'd hit walls they couldn't overcome. The core innovations remained mine alone. James called me the day after the announcement. You did it, kid. Stanton's floundering and you're the talk of the industry. But now you need to decide, do you want to grow steady and solid, or do you want to go big? Big, I said without hesitation. I want to go to New York. 2 weeks later, Miller Analytics opened a sleek office in Manhattan, just 10 blocks from Stanton Enterprises headquarters. It was a deliberate choice. I wanted Richard to know I was in his territory now. I became obsessed with growth, working relentlessly while pushing my team to their limits. Our Series A round brought in $18 million, and we scaled at a pace that terrified our competitors. I transformed myself completely. Not just the company. The awkward programmer disappeared, replaced by someone who commanded attention the moment he walked into a room. My new Tribeca address, tailored wardrobe, and newfound confidence weren't just for show. They were weapons I was sharpening for the inevitable confrontation. I dated strategically, high-profile women who appeared in the society pages Laura surely read. I wanted her to see exactly what she'd walked away from. 9 months after our launch, Miller Analytics had grown to a team of 50 with a client list that included Fortune 500 companies and a valuation approaching $200 million. We were directly competing with Stanton Enterprises for contracts and winning more often than not. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating, an invitation to speak at the annual Tech Innovation Summit, where Richard Stanton was also scheduled to present. We would be on the same stage on the same day. The night before the summit, I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window of my hotel suite, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, mentally rehearsing what I would say if we came face to face. Would he even know who I was? Had Laura told him about her ex-husband's new company? The next morning, I arrived early, sat through the opening keynotes, and waited for my slot. Richard was scheduled to speak right after me, a programming decision that couldn't have been more perfect if I'd arranged it myself. When I took the stage, the room was packed. I launched into my presentation, explaining how Miller Analytics was revolutionizing predictive data analysis across industries. The audience was engaged, asking thoughtful questions. And then, as I was wrapping up, I saw him, Richard Stanton, standing at the back of the room, watching me with a frown. Next to him was Laura, looking stunning in a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw shock register on her face. She hadn't expected this version of me, confident, successful, commanding the room. I finished my presentation to enthusiastic applause, and as I stepped down from the stage, the moderator announced, "And now please welcome Richard Stanton, CEO of Stanton Enterprises." We passed each other at the steps. Up close, Richard was older than his photos suggested, with carefully maintained silver temples and the deep tan of someone who spent weekends on a yacht. He was taller than me, broader in the shoulders, dressed impeccably in what was clearly a bespoke suit. "Impressive presentation," he said, extending his hand. "Richard Stanton." I took his hand, gripping perhaps a bit harder than necessary. "Ethan Miller, Miller Analytics." A flicker of recognition crossed his face, quickly replaced by a calculating look. "Miller? Any relation to Laura Miller?" So she'd kept my name. Interesting. "Ex-husband," I said evenly. "Small world, isn't it?" Before he could respond, the moderator called his name again, and he had to take the stage. I walked to the back of the room where Laura stood frozen, her face pale. "Hello, Laura," I said quietly. "You look well." "Ethan," she managed. I had no idea you'd be here." "Clearly," I smiled. "Are you enjoying the summit? The presentations have been fascinating." She glanced nervously toward the stage, where Richard was beginning his talk. "You've changed," she said. "Success will do that. I meant to reach out, after I heard about your company, to congratulate you." "Did you?" I kept my tone light. "Well, better late than never." She lowered her voice. "Does Richard know who you are? Who you really are?" "He does now." I nodded toward the stage. "But don't worry, I didn't mention how helpful you were in sharing my early algorithms with his team." "That can be our little secret." She blanched. "Ethan, that wasn't what you intended? Wasn't supposed to matter because I was just a small-time programmer who would never amount to anything." I shrugged. Water under the bridge now. On stage, Richard was struggling. His presentation lacked the energy and innovation of mine, and the audience could sense it. The questions were more challenging, less engaged. "Your husband seems to be having a rough time up there," I observed. "Stanton Enterprises has had a few setbacks lately, I hear." Laura's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing, Ethan?" "Building a successful company. Isn't that what you always wanted?" "You know what I mean. Are you deliberately targeting Richard's business?" I laughed softly. "Paranoid, aren't we? The tech world is competitive. May the best platform win." Richard finished his presentation to polite but subdued applause. As he made his way back to us, I saw the tension in his shoulders, the forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Darling," and he said to Laura, barely acknowledging me, "we should get going. We have that dinner." "Of course." Laura took his arm, but her eyes stayed on me. "It was unexpected to see you, Ethan." "I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other," I said pleasantly. "New York is a small town in some ways." Richard gave me a curt nod. "Miller, good luck with your startup." "Oh, we're well past the startup phase," I corrected him. "But thank you. Good luck with your, what did the press call it? Technical challenges?" His jaw tightened, but he said nothing, steering Laura away through the crowd. As I watched them go, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. This was just the beginning. The confrontation at the Tech Innovation Summit marked a turning point. Within weeks, the industry was buzzing with comparisons between Miller Analytics and Stanton Enterprises, with most favoring the newcomer. Our stock price climbed. Theirs began a slow descent. I leveraged the momentum, pushing for more aggressive expansion, targeting Stanton's key clients with demonstrations that highlighted the superiority of our platform. We poached 3 of their top developers, who brought valuable insights into Stanton's technical struggles. My profile rose alongside the company's. I was featured in Forbes, invited onto CNBC, profiled in the Wall Street Journal. I made sure each piece mentioned my humble beginnings in Brooksville, the bootstrapped nature of Miller Analytics' early days, a subtle contrast to Richard Stanton's silver spoon background. 6 months after the summit, we landed a contract with Global Finance Partners, one of Stanton Enterprises' oldest and most profitable clients. The day the news broke, our stock jumped 15%, and I received a text from an unknown number. "This isn't a game you want to play. Back off. Arse." I saved the number but didn't respond. The threat only confirmed what I already knew. Richard Stanton was feeling the pressure. 2 weeks later, I attended a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. As I circulated through the crowd, champagne in hand, I spotted Laura alone by a Greek statue, looking troubled. "Penny for your thoughts," I said, approaching her. She started. "Ethan, you seem to be everywhere these days." "It's that kind of town." I looked around. "No Richard tonight?" "He's dealing with a situation at the office." She took a sip of champagne. "Something you might know about?" "Global Finance Partners, perhaps?" I smiled. "They made a business decision, Laura. Nothing personal." "It feels personal." She lowered her voice. "What do you want, Ethan? Revenge? Is that what this is about?" "This is about building the best company I can," I said smoothly. "If that happens to impact your husband's business, well, competition is healthy, isn't it?" She studied me, her eyes searching mine. "You've become exactly what you used to criticize. Cutthroat, obsessed with success, willing to step on others to get ahead." "I learned from the best." I gestured around the opulent room. "Isn't this what you wanted? The galas, the recognition, the success? I'm just giving you a chance to see what it would have been like if you'd stayed." "That's cruel," she whispered. "Crueler than walking out on your husband the day before his big break? Crueler than sharing his proprietary work with a competitor?" I kept my voice gentle, at odds with my words. "I don't think so." She flinched. "Richard and I are getting married," she said abruptly. "Next month, at the plaza." I raised an eyebrow. "Congratulations. I'm sure it will be beautiful. I want you to stop this, whatever it is you're doing, as a wedding gift." I laughed. "Now who's being cruel?" "No, Laura, I'm just getting started." She gripped my arm. "Richard is dangerous when he's cornered, Ethan. You don't know what he's capable of. Neither does he know what I'm capable of." I removed her hand gently. "Enjoy the rest of your evening. Give my best to the groom." As I walked away, my phone buzzed with a text from my CFO. "We need to talk. Stanton's making moves." The game was escalating. The next morning, I learned what Richard's moves entailed. Stanton Enterprises had filed a lawsuit against Miller Analytics, claiming intellectual property theft and corporate espionage. The irony was almost comical. "They have nothing," Marcus assured me after reviewing the filing. "This is a desperation play, meant to spook your investors and slow your momentum." "Can we counter?" I asked. "With pleasure." Marcus grinned. "We'll file a countersuit alleging that Stanton's delayed analytics platform was actually based on your work, shared without authorization during your marriage to Laura." "That would drag her into it," I noted. "Does that bother you?" I thought about it. "No, she made her choice." The legal battle made headlines, adding fuel to the already intense rivalry between the companies. Our stock took a temporary hit, but recovered quickly when several industry analysts published pieces questioning Stanton's claims and praising Miller Analytics innovations. 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, I received an invitation in the mail. Thick cream paper with gold embossing. "Mr. and Mrs. Richard Stanton request the pleasure of your company at their wedding." Inside was a handwritten note from Laura. "Ethan, I'd love for you to see what real success looks like. No hard feelings? L." The sheer audacity took my breath away. Was this some kind of twisted olive branch? Or a calculated move to show me that despite our legal battle, she and Richard were untouchable? Either way, it presented an opportunity I couldn't ignore. I RSVP'd with a simple, "Ethan Miller +1 will attend." Then I called my investment team. "I want to know everything about Stanton Enterprises' financial situation. Board members, shareholders, outstanding loans, everything. Are we looking at an acquisition? My CFO asked. Something like that. What I discovered was fascinating. Despite the outward appearance of success, Stanton Enterprises was over-leveraged. Richard had been taking risks, expanding too quickly, and the company's stock was vulnerable. The lawsuit against us was likely a smokescreen to distract from their weakening position. With the right strategy, at the right time, a takeover was possible. I began quietly buying shares through various shell companies and investment vehicles. Not enough to trigger any alarms, but steadily increasing our position. I also started courting key board members and institutional investors, suggesting that Stanton's leadership might not be as solid as they thought. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received another text from Richard's number. "I know what you're doing. Back off now, or I'll destroy everything you've built." I forwarded it to Marcus with the message, "More evidence for our harassment counterclaim." The next day, Stanton Enterprises announced a surprise press conference. Richard stood before the cameras, looking confident as he unveiled a revolutionary new direction for the company, a pivot toward artificial intelligence and machine learning, areas where Miller Analytics had not yet established a strong presence. The market responded positively, with Stanton's stock jumping 8%. My phone rang immediately. "Did you see that?" James asked. "He's trying to outflank you." "Let him try," I said calmly. "He's too late." The week before the wedding, we made our move. Miller Analytics announced a tender offer for Stanton Enterprises shares at a premium that was hard for shareholders to resist. The business world was shocked, a 3-year-old company trying to swallow one that had been around for decades. But what they didn't know was that we already controlled nearly 30% of the shares, and we had commitments from enough other shareholders to push us over the 50% mark. The takeover was hostile, swift, and brutal. Richard called me directly, his voice shaking with rage. "You can't do this. The board won't allow it." "The board doesn't have a choice," I said calmly, "and neither do you. This is about Laura, isn't it? This whole thing, it's because she chose me over you." "This is business, Richard. You tried to steal my work, threatened me, sued my company. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" "I'll fight this," he promised, "with everything I have." "You don't have much left," I pointed out. "But hey, look on the bright side. You still have the wedding to look forward to." "Speaking of which, I'm looking forward to meeting your board members in a more social setting." I hung up before he could respond. The timing wasn't coincidental. I wanted Richard distracted, off balance, and humiliated right before his big day, but I didn't want to stop the wedding. No, I very much wanted that to proceed because I had one more card to play. The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a custom Tom Ford suit, selected a platinum Patek Philippe watch, a recent indulgence, and had my driver take me to the plaza. My plus one was Jessica, my VP of operations. Not a romantic date, but a shrewd businesswoman who understood exactly what today was about. "Remember," I told her as we pulled up to the hotel, "we're not here to make a scene. We're here to observe." Jessica nodded, and to be observed. The plaza's ballroom was transformed into a floral wonderland, with white orchids and roses everywhere. A string quartet played softly as guests in designer finery mingled. I recognized faces from magazine covers and business news. Richard had invited the cream of New York society. When Laura walked down the aisle in a Vera Wang gown that probably will cost more than our first apartment, I felt nothing. Not anger, not loss, not even satisfaction at what was about to happen. Just a curious detachment, as if I were watching a movie about someone else's life. Richard beamed at his bride, looking every inch the successful businessman in his bespoke tuxedo. He didn't notice me sitting quietly in the middle row, nor did he seem aware that several of his board members kept glancing nervously at their phones. The ceremony was brief and tasteful. They exchanged vows, rings were presented on a silk pillow, and they sealed their union with a kiss as guests applauded. I clapped politely along with everyone else. It was during the reception that things began to unravel. Richard and Laura were making the rounds, accepting congratulations, when Richard's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, and excused himself. Minutes later, he returned looking pale. I sipped my champagne and watched as he whispered urgently to one of his executives. More phones began to buzz. The business crowd at the wedding was starting to realize something was happening. And then Richard saw me. Our eyes met across the room and I raised my glass in a silent toast. The confusion on his face quickly morphed into shock as recognition dawned, followed by something darker. He started toward me, but was intercepted by another board member who showed him something on a tablet. Richard's face drained of all color. The news was breaking. Miller Analytics had successfully acquired a controlling interest in Stanton Enterprises. Effective immediately, the board would be restructured, with myself as the new chairman. In other words, I now owned Richard's company. Laura, still floating on her bridal bliss, seemed oblivious to the business drama unfolding around her. She continued chatting with guests, showing off her ring, accepting compliments on the beautiful ceremony. I decided it was time to offer my personal congratulations. Laura, du har most on yellow lisher, I said, approaching her with a warm smile. You look beautiful. She turned, and the shock on her face was priceless. Ethan, I didn't think you'd actually come. And miss your big day? Never. I kissed her cheek, breathing in the same expensive perfume she'd been wearing the day she left. Marriage is a serious commitment, almost as serious as business. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What are you doing here, Ethan? Really? I was invited. I held up my hands innocently, and I wanted to see how the other half lives. Very impressive. She studied me, taking in the suit, the watch, the confidence that hadn't been there before. You've changed. Success will do that. I heard your company was doing well. She glanced around. Is that your date? She's pretty. Jessica, she's my VP of operations. Brilliant woman. I smiled. Speaking of operations, have you checked on your husband? He seems a bit preoccupied. Laura frowned and looked across the room where Richard was now surrounded by a group of agitated men in suits. What's going on over there? Just some business news breaking. Nothing that should ruin your special day. I took another sip of champagne. Tell me, Laura, are you happy? Did you get everything you wanted? She seemed taken aback by the question. Of course I am. Richard gives me everything I could ever ask for. Everything has a price, I said mildly. I learned that from you. Before she could respond, Richard appeared at her side, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Laura, we need to talk, now. Richard, what's wrong? It's our wedding reception. Ask him, Richard snarled, glaring at me. I extended my hand. Richard Stanton, we've never formally met, though I feel like I know you. Congratulations on your marriage. He ignored my hand. You orchestrated this, today, of all days. Orchestrated what? Laura looked between us, confused. He's taken over the company, Richard said through gritted teeth. A hostile takeover, announced right in the middle of our wedding reception. Laura's eyes widened as she turned to me. You did what? I shrugged. Business is business. Timing is everything. Isn't that what you told me, Richard? Through Laura, of course. You son of a... Richard, Laura hissed. Not here, everyone's watching. And they were. The elegant wedding reception had transformed into something else entirely, with guests whispering and pointing, phones out as they read the breaking news. The fairy tale wedding was now a business scandal in the making. We should discuss this privately, I suggested. Perhaps in one of the hotel's conference rooms? My team has prepared a transition plan that's quite generous, all things considered. Richard looked like he might explode. You think I'm just going to hand over my company? The company I built from nothing? You don't have a choice, I said calmly. The shareholders have spoken, but I'm willing to keep you on in an advisory capacity if you're interested. An advisory capacity? He repeated incredulously. At my own company? My company now, I corrected him. Though technically it belongs to the shareholders, and they've lost confidence in your leadership. Laura was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Ethan, how could you do this, today of all days? How could I? I laughed softly. Laura, you left me for this man the day before I secured the funding that changed my life. You shared proprietary information about my platform with him. And then you had the audacity to invite me to watch you marry him. Did you really think I would just sit back and applaud? Richard's eyes narrowed. What proprietary information? Laura, what is he talking about? A flash of guilt crossed Laura's face. It wasn't like that, Richard. I just mentioned his project in passing. She told you enough that you were able to incorporate elements of my technology into your latest analytics platform, I said. Not enough to replicate it entirely, but enough that your lawyers should have raised intellectual property concerns. Richard turned to them. Is this true? I might have described some aspects of his work, but you didn't think it mattered, I finished for her. Because I was just a small-time programmer with big dreams, right? A nobody from Brooksville who would never amount to anything. The color drained from Laura's face. That's not fair. Life rarely is. I straightened my tie. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should mingle with my new board members. We have a lot to discuss about the future of Stanton, or should I say, Miller Stanton Enterprises. As I turned to leave, Laura grabbed my arm. Ethan, wait, can we talk? Privately? I looked down at her hand, then back at her face. I think we've said everything that needs to be said. Please, she whispered. 5 minutes. Richard was already being pulled away by his frantic team, too distracted by the business catastrophe to notice his new bride slipping away with me. I followed Laura to a small balcony off the main ballroom. The New York skyline spread out before us, lights twinkling in the early evening. Say what you need to say, I told her, keeping my distance. Laura took a deep breath. I'm sorry for how things ended between us, for what I said that day. Which part? The part where you called me a failure, or the part where you betrayed my trust by sharing my work with your new boyfriend? She winced. All of it. I was unhappy, Ethan. I felt stuck in a life that wasn't going anywhere. And now, are you happy with the life you chose? She looked back toward the reception, where chaos was still unfolding. I thought I was. Until the money and power were threatened, I noted. Interesting how that works. That's not fair. I didn't marry Richard for his money. I raised an eyebrow. Not just for his money, she amended. He was stable, established. He knew what he wanted and how to get it. And I didn't? You had dreams, Ethan. Beautiful dreams, but dreams don't pay the bills. I gestured to myself. Does this look like a dream to you? Miller Analytics is valued at over $1 billion. We employ 300 people, and now we own Stanton Enterprises. Laura looked at me with new eyes. I didn't know it would happen so fast. When I heard your company was doing well, I don't know what I thought. That I'd had a moderate success, that I'd finally gotten my little project off the ground. I shook my head. You never believed in me, Laura, not really. That's not true, she protested. I supported you for years, until something better came along. I leaned against the balcony railing. Why did you invite me to the wedding? The real reason. She looked away. I don't know, maybe I wanted you to see that I was happy. Maybe I wanted closure. Or maybe you wanted to rub your new life in my face, I suggested, to prove that you'd made the right choice by leaving. Maybe, she admitted quietly. I didn't expect this. She gestured vaguely toward the reception. What happens now, Ethan? Now, Richard has two choices. He can fight a losing battle to keep control of his company, or he can accept my generous transition package and walk away with his dignity somewhat intact. And us? What about us? There was a vulnerability in her voice I hadn't heard in years. I studied her for a moment. The woman I had once loved more than anything. The woman who had broken my heart and inadvertently set me on the path to where I stood today. There is no us, Laura. There hasn't been for a long time. But there could be, she said, stepping closer. We could try again. Things are different now. You're different. I almost laughed. You're married as of about an hour ago. Marriages can be annulled, she said quickly. Richard and it's complicated. And now, with everything that's happened, let me get this straight, I said slowly. You're suggesting we rekindle our relationship now that I'm successful, now that I have money and power. She flushed. That's not fair. I always cared about you, Ethan. We had history. History isn't enough. I straightened up. You know what I realized after you left? That I deserve someone who believes in me when things are hard, someone who sees my potential even when I can't see it myself. I made a mistake, she whispered. We all make mistakes. Yes, we do. I nodded. And then we live with the consequences. I could see the desperation growing in her eyes as she realized I wasn't going to offer her an escape route from the mess her life had suddenly become. What am I supposed to do now? Go back in there and pretend everything's fine while my husband's company falls apart? That's up to you. I moved toward the door. But if I were you, I'd start thinking about a prenup. Richard's net worth just took a significant hit. You're enjoying this, she accused, seeing us suffer. No, I said honestly. I thought I would, but I don't. I just feel free. Laura's eyes filled with tears. I never meant to hurt you, Ethan. I just wanted more than what we had. And now you have more than you bargained for, I replied. Goodbye, Laura. I walked back into the reception to find it in complete disarray. Richard was nowhere to be seen, whisked away to an emergency meeting with his lawyers, no doubt. Guests were leaving in droves, the celebration effectively over. Jessica found me by the bar. Mission accomplished? I nodded. Let's get out of here. As we headed for the exit, a commotion near the gift table caught my attention. Richard had returned, his face flushed with what I assumed was a combination of rage and alcohol. Miller, he shouted, pointing at me. You think this is over? You think you've won? The remaining guest turned to stare as he stalked toward me, his movements unsteady. Richard, Laura pleaded, trying to take his arm. Not here, let's go. He shook her off. No, I want everyone to know what kind of man he is. The kind who'd ruin a wedding out of spite. I stood my ground as he approached. I think you've had enough champagne, Richard. Why don't you listen to your wife? My wife, he laughed bitterly, the woman who was so impressed by your little computer program that she couldn't wait to tell me all about it. He turned to Laura. Did you know he was planning this? Were you in on it? What? No, Laura looked horrified. Richard, please. Because it seems awfully convenient, he continued. You leave him, tell me about his project, and then, surprise, he shows up a billionaire and takes my company. The accusation hung in the air. Several guests gasped. That's enough, I said firmly. You're embarrassing yourself and your bride. You don't get to tell me what's enough. Richard lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my lapels. You've taken everything from me. Security was moving toward us, but before they could intervene, Richard swung wildly, his fist connecting with my jaw. The impact was more surprising than painful. He was too drunk to put much force behind it. I stumbled back but didn't fall. The room went silent. Feel better? I asked quietly, straightening my tie. Richard stood there, breathing hard, the fight seemingly gone out of him. 2 security guards took his arms. Don't worry, I told them. I won't press charges. It's his wedding day after all. Laura rushed to Richard's side, her face a mask of mortification. I'm so sorry, she said, though it wasn't clear if she was apologizing to me or to the guests. Take care of your husband, Laura, I said. He's going to need you. As Jessica and I walked out, the whispers followed us. By morning, the incident would be all over the business press. The wedding day takeover, followed by the groom's public meltdown. Was it worth it? Jessica asked as our car pulled away from the plaza. I touched my jaw, which was beginning to throb. Every damn second. The fallout was swift and merciless. By Monday morning, Richard Stanton had been officially removed as CEO of what was now Miller Stanton Enterprises. The board voted unanimously to accept the new leadership structure, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Richard's downfall was spectacular. His scathing interviews on financial networks only made him look unhinged, his accusations increasingly desperate. Within months, his reputation was in tatters, his social circle evaporated, and his other business interests began to crumble. The last I heard, he'd retreated to his house in the Hamptons, drinking heavily and refusing visitors. Laura filed for divorce 3 months after the wedding. The prenup she'd signed limited her settlement significantly, and without Richard's fortune, she disappeared from the social scene entirely. Rumor had it she'd moved back to her hometown, her dreams of luxury and status permanently shattered. As for me, Miller Stanton Enterprises flourished beyond expectation. The predictive analytics platform that started in my tiny apartment was revolutionizing how businesses around the world operated. The company that nearly died in my Brooksville apartment now employed thousands. Occasionally, I'd receive messages from Laura. Attempts at reconciliation, apologies, pleas for help. I never responded. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. At my next board meeting, someone asked if we'd ever dropped the Stanton from our company name. Never, I replied with a smile. It's important to remember where we came from and where some people ended up.